Welcome to Uncovered Crime. In today's story, we are stepping into one of the most shocking true crime cases to ever shake a quiet Kentucky community. It begins on the morning of May 17, 2005, a morning that would forever change the lives of everyone who knew Robert Bob Bosley, a successful businessman and beloved father. What unfolded that day was not just a crime, it was a revelation of betrayal, greed, and deception so deep that even seasoned investigators were left stunned. It was early dawn when a frantic 911 call pierced through the calm of Alexandria, Kentucky. On the line was a terrified woman, her voice shaking, her words almost unintelligible. She screamed that someone had broken into her home, attacked her family, and shot her husband. Before dispatchers could calm her down, the call was abruptly cut off by the sound of a loud crash. In that chilling moment, no one yet knew that behind the walls of that rustic log cabin, a scene of horror and mystery was waiting to be uncovered. When police rushed to the scene, they found chaos. The house looked as though it had been torn apart, drawers yanked open, items tossed to the floor, glass shattered across rooms, and then, inside the bedroom, they found him. Robert Bob Bosley was slumped forward on his knees by the side of the bed, lifeless, riddled with gunshot wounds. At first glance, it appeared to be a violent robbery gone wrong. But for the seasoned investigators on site, something felt off. The mess inside the house looked too deliberate, too staged, and as the hours unfolded, the truth behind Bob's death would prove far darker than anyone could have imagined. This is the story of Robert and Amy Bosley's story of ambition, wealth, deception, and ultimately, murder. A story where the image of a perfect family shattered in a single night. And most disturbingly, a story where the killer wasn't a stranger lurking in the shadows, but someone much closer, who was Robert Bob Bosley. Robert Bob Bosley was born on August 2nd, 1962, in the small, tight-knit town of Alexandria, Kentucky. Raised in a religious and hard-working household alongside his siblings Deborah, Henry Jr., and James Bob, grew up with a strong sense of ambition. Those who knew him as a child described him as sharp, determined, and willing to put in long hours to achieve what he wanted. Unlike many kids his age, who dreamed about quick success, Bob seemed to understand early on that real wealth came through grit, patience, and relentless work. He started small. As a teenager, Bob offered chimney cleaning and small-scale roof repairs to his neighbors. It wasn't glamorous work, but he put everything he had into it. He was reliable, affordable, and hard-working, and people noticed. By the time most young men his age were still figuring out their futures, Bob had already carved out his own path. What began as one man with a ladder and a bucket soon evolved into a legitimate company, Bosley Roofing and Chimney Sweep of Alexandria. Bob's company quickly gained a reputation for quality and efficiency. He was known for being hands-on, ensuring that every job reflected his standards. Within a few years, his little operation had grown into a thriving enterprise, bringing in impressive profits. With that money, Bob began to expand his investments, around 20 rental properties in the region. By his early 30s, he wasn't just another local tradesman. He was one of Alexandria's most successful entrepreneurs, and Bob enjoyed the fruits of his labor. He owned luxury sports cars, fine horses, a large boat, even his own small airplane. To some, his lifestyle was a sign of arrogance. To others, it was an inspiration, proof that hard work could turn into wealth. But wealth often brings with it temptation. Bob's boat, often seen cruising Lake Cumberland, became notorious for its extravagant parties filled with alcohol, loud music, and guests dressed for indulgence. It was during this chapter of his life that Bob met the woman who would forever alter his fate, Amy Pave. The beginning of Bob and Amy Pave was born in 1969, also in Alexandria. Her childhood, however, was nothing like Bob's. She came from a modest, working-class family. Money was always tight, and her father struggled with alcoholism, leaving Amy and her siblings to grow up faster than they should have. But Amy wasn't content to repeat the struggles of her upbringing. Determined to create a better future, she excelled in school, graduating near the top of her high school class in 1986. She pursued business studies at a community college connected to Northern Kentucky University, funding her education by working part-time as a waitress. It was at a local restaurant where their paths crossed. Bob, nearly a decade older, was already wealthy and well-known in town. Amy, just 18, was fresh out of school, ambitious but inexperienced. He was charismatic, confident, and surrounded by a lifestyle she had never seen before. She was quiet, polite, and reserved, but something about her drew him in. What started as casual encounters soon blossomed into something more. Bob invited her to one of his infamous lake parties, and soon Amy was no longer just a guest. She was a central part of Bob's world. After 4 years of dating, the pair married. For Amy, it was a complete transformation from the daughter of a struggling family to the wife of one of Alexandria's wealthiest and most desirable men. To outsiders, it looked like a fairy tale. The ambitious businessman and the small-town girl who found her way into his heart. The couple went on to have 2 children, their daughter, Morgan, born in 1996, and their son, Trevor, born 3 years later. With her new role as a mother, Amy seemed to leave behind the party lifestyle. She dedicated herself to raising the kids while Bob continued to expand his empire. But behind the smiles of family photos and their prominent presence in church and school activities, cracks were beginning to form. The hidden strains. Bob loved business, but he hated the administrative side of it. Payroll, taxes, invoices, it all bored him. He wanted to be out on the lake, not behind a desk. So, when Amy offered to step in, it felt like the perfect solution. With her background in business administration, she began handling the company's finances, but that's where things took a dangerous turn. Unbeknownst to Bob, Amy wasn't just paying the bills and filing the taxes. She had set up a secret system. Instead of sending the company's tax payments to the IRS, she began quietly diverting the money into her own private accounts. For years, her embezzlement went unnoticed. Bob continued to enjoy his wealth, his toys, and his parties, while Amy kept the financial books under her control. But the IRS doesn't ignore unpaid taxes forever. Agents began sending letters, making calls, trying to schedule meetings, and Bob never saw any of it. That's because Amy had cleverly redirected all IRS correspondence to a private mailbox only she could access. It was a dangerous game, but one she thought she could keep playing indefinitely until May of 2005, the morning of May 17th, 2005. At 5 a.m., a frantic 911 call came from the Bosley cabin. Amy's voice was panicked, describing a home invasion, an attacker, a husband shot. Before she could give more details, a loud crashing noise cut the call short. Police raced to the scene. They found Amy clutching her 2 children, visibly shaken. Her sister soon arrived to take the kids, while Amy was escorted to the station for questioning. The house was placed under lockdown, and crime scene investigators got to work. What they found was puzzling. The cabin was in disarray. Pulled open, items scattered, prescription bottles tossed across the bathroom floor. A rear door had a broken window, but curiously, the majority of the glass was on the outside of the door, not inside, suggesting it had been broken from within the house. In the bedroom, Bob's body lay at the side of the bed, riddled with bullets. But here, too, the scene didn't quite make sense. Despite multiple gunshot wounds, only 2 shell casings were found nearby. Where were the rest? Investigators searched the house further, and in the basement laundry room, they made a chilling discovery. Inside the washing machine, beneath wet clothes, was a folded cloth. Hidden inside were 4 more shell casings. It was a discovery that turned the case upside down. What intruder would stop to hide evidence in the victim's own washing machine? Something wasn't right. Amy's story at the police station. Amy gave her account. She described the intruder as a white male with a nasal voice, foul breath, and a strange smell like urine. She claimed he attacked both her and Bob, leaving marks on her chest. She said Bob wasn't well liked, that he had enemies, even pointing the finger at a contractor friend named Noah Heim, who had recently argued with Bob. But Noah had a rock-solid alibi, and besides, none of it explained the inconsistencies in Amy's story. Her version of events didn't match the timeline her children described. 9-year-old Morgan and 6-year-old Trevor told investigators they were awakened first by gunshots, then by the sound of glass breaking. Amy had said the opposite. Even the marks on her chest looked strange, too symmetrical, almost as if they had been deliberately made. Her blouse, supposedly torn during the attack, turned out to have been cut with scissors before being ripped. The pieces of the puzzle were beginning to come together. The crime scene wasn't just chaotic, it was staged. And the person staging, it was the same one who called 911. The IRS connection. As the investigation deepened, a new factor emerged. The IRS agents came forward, revealing that Bob owed over $1.7 million in unpaid taxes. A meeting had been scheduled with him for the very day of his murder. And there was more. During earlier calls, someone had pretended to be Bob using a strange, high-pitched voice. To the IRS agents, it was obvious. It wasn't Bob, it was Amy impersonating her husband. The motive was becoming clearer. Amy had embezzled company money, siphoning off tax funds to support her lifestyle, and now the IRS was closing in. Exposure would mean financial ruin, prison, and possibly the end of her marriage. For Amy, there was only one way to stop it all from crashing down: murder.